Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K18's My League Mode. My name is Pete and today we complete the second half of the offseason with the Louisville Legionnaires. In the last episode we prepared ourselves for free agency, we moved away all of our draft picks so we have no new rookies on the team, but that also means we didn't take on any additional salary. We also got rid of all of our cap holds, and all of that because of two guys who are available in this year's free agency, Anthony Davis and Demarcus Cousins. Now, the consensus in the comments last episode was to go after Davis, and I would have to agree with that. If I could choose between the two, Davis would be my pick. He is younger than Cousins, slightly higher rated, and playing him next to Mohamed Bamba would be an absolute nightmare for our opponents. Still, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't happily accept Cousins. He is a fantastic player as well and more than capable of playing the power forward, and I have no doubt that he would also be able to take the team to the next level. However, before we are actually able to offer a contract to either one of them, we now have to clear a bit of cap space. Even with no rookies drafted and all of our cap holds removed, we currently only have about $22 million available, which means we roughly need 10 more. Conveniently enough, that puts us right in the range of Skal Labissiere's contract, and since we are looking to acquire another big man, moving one doesn't hurt us all that much. The only problem is that we need to get rid of Labissiere without taking on any additional salary in return. More specifically, we need to ship him off for draft picks, which of course makes this trade very intriguing for other teams, who could now get themselves a young starting caliber power forward without giving up any players to do so. On the other hand, even with free agency upon us, only a handful of teams in the league actually have the cap space to acquire Skal's contract, and I would say let's quickly go through the list and find a good fit for him. The first team with plenty of cap space are the Las Vegas Aces. By the way, we are looking at the team's salary total figure on the top left. The salary cap room for the moment still has a few cap holds factored in, and therefore it does not represent the amount of salary cap the team has if we purely go off the guaranteed contracts. The salary cap for next season will be slightly over $100 million, so the Aces have about $40 million in cap space. However, I'm not quite sure they're willing to spend a quarter of that on a power forward, with Young still under contract for $9 million and Freeman recently drafted. The Aces do have more pressing needs, especially at the shooting guard, and I don't think they want to screw up their options here by acquiring a third power forward. Moving on, we have the Chicago Bulls, who also have a ton of cap space, a bit over $40 million to be exact, but for them, Lauri Markkanen is locked in as the power forward for the future, and Bobby Portis is an adequate backup who probably gets paid a bit too much to not get playing time. The Bulls are of course also looking to re-sign Senator Demarcus Cousins, and should he decide to come back, the addition of Labissiere might make things a little bit too crowded. That brings us to Memphis, who don't really have much going on for them at the moment. Going into the next season, only 4 players have guaranteed contracts. Still, the Grizzlies barely have $25 million in cap space. Looking at their roster, they probably want to rebuild with younger, cheaper talent, especially with Mike Conley realistically leaving after next season, and spending roughly half of their available cap space on a guy like Labissiere might not necessarily be the smartest move in that regard. I'm not ruling them out as a destination entirely, I just think there are better options available, and the Grizzlies wouldn't be desperate to acquire him. So we move on, and now we end up in Atlanta. The Hawks have roughly $30 million in cap space, and they have a relatively young core where Labissiere would fit right in. However, much like the Bulls, they probably already have found their power forward for the future, as John Collins is currently doing a fairly nice job at that position. Acquiring Labissiere would either put Collins or Skal himself into a sixth-man role off the bench, which could be interesting, but then again I think the Hawks should focus a bit more on the small forward position, the only position on the team manned by an expiring player in his 30s. Now, one more thing I also want to mention here with the Hawks. I briefly thought about adding Tyler Ulis to the mix in an effort to trade Ulis and Labissiere for sophomore point guard Brandon Strong. This would actually clear up a bit more cap space than we need and give us a nice defensive-minded point guard in return. However, in the end I decided that Atlanta would probably not accept such an offer. Brandon Strong could very well be their point guard for the future, and this trade would be very similar to us trading away Andre Flanders for Ulis and Labissiere, which honestly I would decline as well. Still, acquiring only Labissiere for picks, that might work with Atlanta. Once again though, I think we can find teams who have a bigger need at the power forward and are therefore willing to pay a bit more. The Sacramento Kings then have cap space, but they are definitely not one such team. It would be pretty ironic to trade Labissiere back to the team that we acquired him from, and the big man rotation in Sacramento is looking very nice at the moment, so there is no way the Kings are willing to give up picks just to add to that. So this now brings us to Orlando, who have roughly $20 million in cap space, so not a whole lot, and who also have Serge Ibaka under contract for the next 3 seasons. Yes, Ibaka is getting old and Labissiere might be an upgrade down the line. At the moment, however, I don't think the Magic would be willing to pay either Ibaka or Labissiere their respective salaries to come off the bench. With the limited amount of cap space the Magic have available, they should probably look into adding a few more rotation players off the bench, especially at the point guard and the center. Labissiere could be a backup option for them, putting either him or Ibaka into a six-man role, but once again the need for Labissiere isn't desperate, which of course would reduce the amount of picks we could get for him. So this now brings us to the first team that should seriously be considered for this move. The Brooklyn Nets already have a young but talented core in place where Labissiere would fit in nicely. They have young starting caliber players with ratings above 80 at the point guard, shooting guard and center already, and they have more than enough cap space to acquire Labissiere at the power forward. Getting a starting caliber player at that position and only giving up picks in return would be a great move for the Nets, and it might make them a bit more willing to part ways with maybe an additional pick, which of course also makes Brooklyn a very attractive trade partner for us. So with the Nets in mind, let's move on to the other team that I really like for this move, the Detroit Pistons. The situation here is very similar. They have a young core in place. After the recent addition of Deshaun Stephens in the draft, the point guard, shooting guard and small forward are now all equipped with starting caliber players, and the Pistons still have about $35 million in cap space to spend. With that kind of money, they could easily acquire Labissiere and maybe even another good player, and they could still go over the cap space to re-sign Andre Drummond using his bird rights. All in all, this would be a fantastic trade for the Pistons, and depending on how the Pistons' future plays out, it could also be a very good one for us. Last season, the Pistons only finished 11th in the East, while Brooklyn was already a bit better, finishing in 5th place. Going forward, even with the addition of Labissiere, the future in Detroit looks a bit more uncertain, because both Andre Drummond and free agent Reggie Jackson are not guaranteed to come back to the team. And that of course makes their draft picks a bit more interesting, as the Pistons might have another rather mediocre season. All in all, I think the chances are a bit higher for Detroit to have a bad season than for Brooklyn to have a bad season. Both teams, however, should be very interested in acquiring Labissiere for picks, and in the end I therefore went with Detroit simply because of the slight chance that we get lucky with their pick. So this right here is the offer on the table. Yes, it includes a lot of draft picks, but it's actually fairly simple. First things first, the Pistons of course get Skal Labissiere. In exchange, we obtain the rights for a pick swap with the Pistons in the next draft. In this pick swap, we would get the better of the two picks, no protections whatsoever, so there is somewhat of a chance that we once again have a lottery pick next season. And if we don't, that pick could still be easily added to any of the trades we do in the future, so it's definitely a nice asset to have. Labissiere should be worth a bit more, however, especially to a team like the Pistons, which is why we are also acquiring a top 10 protected pick in the year after that. Once again, this pick will very likely not be immensely useful, but if it falls between 10 and 20, it could still hold some value. On our side, we then also give up 2 unprotected second rounders, but honestly, I would give those away for free. So that is the move we make. Skal Labissiere only had a short stint with the Legionnaires, but he was able to have an impact almost immediately. He had some big performances in the playoffs, and I have no doubt that he could also help out the Pistons right away. And Detroit seems to think the same, as they agree to the trade, and with that we say goodbye to Skal Labissiere and hello to roughly $33 million of cap space. And that is now enough to finally enter the moratorium period, where our first target will be Anthony Davis. You can see on the right, Davis is asking for about $35 million, but this right here is pretty much the best offer we can make him. The $32.88 million salary eats up all of our cap space, but to make the whole deal a bit more attractive, I have actually added a no-trade clause. I think in the case of a true superstar like Davis, that is a risk worth taking. After all, I don't really plan on trading him anytime soon. So that is now what we're offering, and look here, that offer has actually gained the most interest. Yes, the Pelicans themselves are offering 5 years and a bit more cash, but the no-trade clause is apparently intriguing. With that in mind, we're now moving on to Demarcus Cousins, who asks for slightly less money than Davis, and once again we offer the exact same deal, just shy of $33 million over 4 years, and yes, Cousins also gets a no-trade clause. This is admittedly a bit more risky, as Cousins will be 33 by the end of the contract, but it is unfortunately our only way to make an attractive offer with the limited financials we have available. And even with the no-trade clause, our offer still ranks behind the Bulls and the Kings, who apparently convince with higher salaries and early termination options. So those are our 2 offers on this first day of the moratorium. We don't have anyone else on our immediate target list, so let's skip ahead one day and see if either Davis or Cousins bite. And indeed, here we are, Anthony Davis is ready to become a Legionnaire. Our offer enough to convince him to jump ship from the Pelicans. Cousins, meanwhile, as expected, has accepted another offer, but Davis is willing to sign a deal with us, and we are going to do so and lock him down for the next 4 years. We can see here Cousins returns to the Bulls, but that is no longer a problem for us. We have just secured the services of our first superstar. And with that, we can now actually skip the entire rest of the moratorium. With the signing of Davis, our cap space is completely depleted, and while we could still offer minimum contracts or our mid-level exception, those can apparently only be offered in regular free agency. So since we have no more money to work with, we might as well jump ahead 2 days. And this now also makes it official. Welcome to the Legionnaires, Anthony Davis. Now, with Davis under contract, we can tackle the rest of the free agency period, and with the limited financial options we have available, we are now targeting 3 different roles for the team. First and foremost, we desperately need a backup point guard. Yes, Tyler Ulis is another project that we will work on during the season. For now, though, he will remain with us for the season opener, and that means we now need someone to come off the bench. That someone should ideally be able to run the offense and play some defense. We have enough scoring options on the team though, so that is not as much of a priority. Up next, while we do have a 4-man wing rotation, we could still use one more player there. Ideally, a versatile player who can play both the 2 and the 3. Nothing special, a minimum contract should suffice, but someone who is capable of stepping in should one of our guys get hurt. Last but not least, we could also use another minimum contract down low. Once again, this is mostly a reserve role should someone get injured, but I would be happy to sign another power forward or center, mostly someone who can competently rebound and defend. The first priority, however, I think that's the point guard, and so let's jump into the regular free agency now, where we have 3 offers to make on this first day, and we're going to use them all to hopefully sign a competent backup for Ulis. Now, my prime target for this role is Chris Dunn. Dunn is an excellent playmaker and a very good defender at the point guard. He is below average with his outside shot though, but like I said earlier, we don't really need a scoring skill set, and Dunn's 6'4" frame will be a welcome alternative to 5'10" Tyler Ulis. Dunn also has the golden pickpocket badge, and all of that probably makes him one of the best defenders at the point guard who are currently available. We have to keep in mind that Dunn is a restricted free agent, but it remains to be seen whether or not the Bulls decide to match our offer. Our offer then, that is going to be exactly what he's asking for, a 1-year minimum contract. I am not 100% sure how the situation at the point guard is going to develop going forward, so at this point we don't want to commit long term, we just want to fill a roster spot. With that same mindset, we move on to the second offer. This one will be for Raul Neto, who brings with him a very similar skill set, a bit more reliable from the outside, a bit worse when it comes to his playmaking, and defensively also a step behind Dunn, but still a very good on-ball defender. Injuries are admittedly a bit of a concern with him, but then again his playing time will be limited, and if Dunn accepts our offer, we won't have to worry about it anyway. Neto is therefore the clear second choice, and he also just gets a 1-year minimum contract offer from us. He was asking for slightly more than that, but this is all he gets. The third and final offer then goes to a familiar face. Yes, next to Neto or Dunn, I'm also looking to bring back Rajon Rondo, whose overall rating will likely decrease further next season, but who is still a grade A playmaker and an above-average defender. This is an offer that also plays into that whole realism aspect of the series. Rating-wise, there might be better choices available, but Rondo has now been a part of this deep playoff run last season, and he will provide some much-needed veteran presence. The offer here, once again, a 1-year minimum contract, and with that we have made all of the 3 offers on this first day of free agency. Let's see who's willing to sign. Alright, perfect, that could not have gone any better. Both Chris Dunn and Rajon Rondo are willing to commit to the Legionnaires. Raul Neto is apparently still looking at other options, which is fine with me, he can continue to do so. Dunn and Rondo meanwhile get signed to their respective contracts. And with that, the point guard position is now set. Rondo currently with the slightly higher rating, but I'm sure that will change, and my plan, at least for the moment, is to have Dunn be the second option behind Ulis. With the point guard no longer an issue, we can now move on to the wings, where I'm basically looking for your run-of-the-mill 3-and-D player. Someone who can shoot well enough to demand attention on offense, while he's also capable of defending both the 2 and the 3. Conveniently enough, a player who perfectly fits that mold is available in free agency. Danny Green, meanwhile 33 years old, is only asking for a minimum contract, but he is still an above-average shooter and a very nice perimeter defender. He also has the silver catch-and-shoot badge, which makes him slightly more interesting, and despite his age, his body is mostly still healthy. All that is enough to earn him a contract offer, and it is the already familiar 1-year minimum contract. Moving on, we now once more have a familiar face in Devin Reed, who is asking for slightly more than a minimum contract, but admittedly the difference is almost non-existent. Compared to green, Reed is the better shooter. Defensively, they both have the same rating here, but I would give green a slight edge. Reed also has no noteworthy badges or injuries, and so once again we offer a 1-year minimum contract and move on. The third and final offer of the second day of free agency then goes to Josh Hart, who is admittedly a bit of a backup option. He is a good shooter, but not as good as the other two, and the same also applies to his defense. If none of the other two are willing to sign, Hart would be a good replacement, but I honestly don't think it will come to that. Still, the familiar contract offer will be extended to him as well, and with that we can wrap up the day and see who's willing to sign. Alright, I had not expected that. Apparently nobody's ready to commit just yet. All of the players here are still evaluating their options, and so we have no other choice but to head into the next day. Since I am fairly confident that one of the 3 shooting guards will end up on our team, we can now move on to the next position, as we move down low in search of a defensive-minded big man. The first candidate is quickly found in 6'10" Kyle O'Quinn, who is once again asking for a minimum contract and who would bring good post defense and excellent rebounding skills to the table. He is admittedly not much of a scorer, but then again we are also only looking for an emergency option here, and the ability to protect the paint and grab rebounds is all I'm asking for. In return, O'Quinn is only asking for a minimum contract, so we will gladly offer him one. The next option would then be 6'11" Festus Ezeli, whose skill set is very similar to that of O'Quinn. He is also a good post defender and a fantastic rebounder. Ezeli has the advantage of also being able to score inside from time to time, and he also has a few interesting badges in the Silver Putback King and the Silver Rim Protector. Still, his asking price is the same as O'Quinn's, and so we once again offer a 1-year minimum contract. And at this point I also don't think we need to look at a third option down low. Those two guys are already exactly what I'm looking for, so let us once again wrap up the day and see who's willing to join us now. Alright, that is looking a lot better. 4 players are ready to put on the Legionnaires uniform. Only Josh Hart and Kyle O'Quinn are still looking at other options, but I would say that is now their problem, as we are signing some contracts right now. Now Raul Neto will be declined, the point guard spot is filled already. For the shooting guard spot, however, we have the choice between Devin Reed and Danny Green, and as you can see here I have decided in favor of Green. Yes, Reed is the better shooter, but Green has the edge defensively, and Green also has the advantage of having a useful badge, and lastly he brings some veteran presence to the team. Down low, my secret favorite was Festus Ezeli all along. Him and O'Quinn are admittedly very similar when it comes to rebounding and defense, but Ezeli once again has the slight edge because of his badges, and since O'Quinn apparently can't be bothered, Ezeli it is. And with that, we have now filled all of our needs for the moment. We now have 13 players under contract and could move on to player progression, summer league and training camps. However, the minimum number of players you need on the roster to start the season is 14, so in the next episode we are going to finish the offseason by signing one last player. At this point it might very well end up being Devin Reed. After all, he only got the snub because I liked Green better, but I will have one last good look around at who else is available. We also still have our mid-level exception worth slightly more than $5.5 million, so maybe we can work something out with that. For the moment though, I think we have put the Legionnaires on the path to success. The signing of Anthony Davis might just be the biggest moment in franchise history so far, and I'm excited to see if he can take the team to new heights. Now, as we wrap the episode up, I also want to fulfill a promise to all my supporters on Patreon. You have earned your shout out and I sincerely want to thank you all. So thank you to Nathan Moore, Trent Doyle, Liam Nordell, Oscar Kjellberg, Samuel Wenzel, Tara Chimino, Joshua DeGrasse Baumann, Jesse Austin, Karen Sivert, Sir M. Michael Talpas, Gurno, Roderick S. New, Aaron Johnston, Kim Lupai, Alistair Marnock, Anth Hopper, Brian Goodman, Ginate, Marie Alice, Brian Miles, Michael Hellquist, Eric Steele, Julian Link, Frederick James Jan Ellich, Autumn Mamrak, and Gero Knob. I hope I pronounced at least half of those correctly, otherwise feel free to let me know in the comments, but above all, thank you all so much for your support. And with that, let's make the cut right here. As always, if you liked the episode, then I would be happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and if you want to support the channel, then you can either subscribe if you haven't already, or you can support the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.